This conference will now be recorded.
Well, welcome to day 3 of our training this week. So I'm going to do a quick audio check. Can you all see my screen and hear my voice?
Yep.
Great. Our recording. Okay, so today we're going to cover we have some really cool demos today. In fact, the SMS text one, we're taking it to the next level to show you how to do forms without flow notifications and without email notifications, SharePoint Designer workflows. We're using SMS to do that now, and I'm really excited about showing this demo. We did it in our webinar last week as well, but we're going to do it again today, and we actually have a lab for you on this. So it's a nice, I think, addendum to what we did yesterday with the initial SMS text for verification. We're really showing today how to use it to streamline processing, and we'll talk more about that in a second, along with dashboards. So we're going to actually do dashboards today and show you kind of the best practices around dashboards. And dashboards is something that come up a lot, and most people don't think of using FormsViewer and InfoPath to do dashboards, but they're actually a pretty viable alternative to some of the other technologies out there today. SharePoint list and library views are limited in the amount of data they can display. The filtering mechanism in SharePoint is using SharePoint's APIs, which are REST-based. REST is a protocol, and it can be slow, and it can be also limited to the amount of items. With FormsViewer and Forms, we can actually get around some of those limitations, and if we add DBXL for the scale out, we can get around all of those size limitations in SharePoint. The other thing that is kind of interesting with dashboards is today we don't really have a good dashboard technology in SharePoint other than creating web pages and creating, you can create Power BI, but then you have licensing questions, right? So, and I think, Lisa, you're more familiar with this issue than anyone else here because of the dashboard stuff that you're dealing with right now. But everyone has dashboard needs. You need to be able to allow people to find forms quickly, and you need some way for them to do that. The out-of-the-box approach has some limits. We'll talk about those. We'll talk about the best practices for creating a dashboard form, and then you have a lab on it, a relatively simple lab that we'll demo. So that's the kind of the quick preview. Before we do day 3, so this is the slide I should have been on. So we're going to show that, right, the mobile users with the SMS codes, we did that yesterday, but we're going to show the one-click access today to streamline that even further. We'll show the dashboard form at the end. So we're going to switch the demos around a little bit and do the one-click access first, and then we're going to do the dashboard form second. And I believe we also have a demo showing how to add the SMS logic, the Twilio SMS logic to your form using an XTP. That's going to be number 2. So right before we do the dashboard stuff, we'll do another demo on showing how to add SMS text capabilities to any form using a reusable template part. Okay, so before we get started though, let's do a quick recap on yesterday, and let's ask a few questions. So first question up, I'm going to ask Kira, if you're available, if you don't mind, how does texting someone verify who they are? Seems like a pretty stupid question.
It sends the code to their phone for them to enter in.
Yep, easy peasy. How does the solution extend SharePoint, David? This is kind of a little bit trickier.
I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if you said my name or not.
Yeah. Do you want to answer the second one? Sorry.
Yeah, I'd say it extends it because you don't have to, use a portal or anything like that. It's all straight to their phone. You don't have to have internet access necessarily right there. That's a tough one. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, the internet access is actually kind of an interesting point because they will need to be able to be connected to see the forms because the forms are in their browser, right? And the browser has a 30-minute state. So you could actually open a form, go offline, fill it out, and hit submit when you're back online. But if you if you wait more than 30 minutes, there will be a state. The state will get, I think it's automatically expired or something. I forget the technical stuff around it, but there is a 30-minute. I think the state gets out of. It goes stale. That's
Like
the word.
Right, it just like times you out.
Yeah, I mean most of the, and I'm not sure it's true for all browsers, but most of them will require a connection back to the server within 30 minutes just to keep the state fresh. And if they lose that, then there's no way to submit. So this is a limitation with the browser-based forms, and FormsViewer uses the browser. So you can't go truly offline and go down into the depths of like say a coal mine and fill out a form because unless you have Wi-Fi down there. And for that, there are a couple other solutions. Obviously, Power Apps has a rich client. So for those forms where you really need to be offline, up until Power Apps was viable, which before last year, we partnered with Formotus, which was another company that allowed you to reuse your InfoPath forms and take them offline using their rich app. We're not as close to them as we used to be. They have had some issues with their company, and so we're not recommending Formotus anymore, but we are recommending Power Apps for those solutions. So the third question then, how does it save you money? Let's see. Kirby, do you want to answer that? Didn't think I'd pick on you, did you?
Okay. So I think Twilio is, you can use Twilio as the third-party service for sending text messages for approval. So that's free. So it doesn't cost you any money.
Well, it's free up to 1,000 texts for the first initial, and then after that, you're spending 1 to 3 cents per text. That's pretty cheap, but it also saves you money on SharePoint, right? Because you don't have to have those users logged in. They don't have to have a user account in SharePoint. They don't have to have a 365 license, right? So there's a $7 a month or whatever it is savings there for those external users. You don't have to provision them in SharePoint, and that's kind of where I was getting. But yeah, that's a good point. Twilio is very inexpensive and free for the first 1K text. I think that's still the case. We should verify that. Next question, what is the name for reusable sections in InfoPath? This one's pretty easy one. I'm going to throw this to Lisa. Lisa, do you remember what the name is for those reusable sections that we demoed yesterday?
Nope.
It's down below here. It's XTP. So it's really, sorry, stupid questions here. Yeah, XML template part is the name. And then what do they include by default? So when you add an XTP to your form, like we did yesterday with the FB controls, what do they add to your form? What are the pieces of stuff that they add to your form, Joanne?
Well, it may include the section, the buttons, and also the data source. And the pre-added rules are already there as well for the XTP. It can also have some secondary data source.
Wonderful. Spot on, as they say. Okay, last question. Are there any drawbacks to using XTPs? I guess I'll go back to you, Joanne, for this, because you seem to be really up to speed on XTPs, obviously, because you've been here for 10 years. But what are the drawbacks of XTPs? Do you remember what I said yesterday?
Yeah, I think that the drawback will be that you can only add it once, because if you click on the control twice, it will duplicate the fields in your main data source.
There's one other drawback that we didn't mention yesterday, which is that they can't, with Q rules, you have to have those fix-ups. So we had the temp command and the temp result that we had to go back in and fix up in the XTP after we added it, because we couldn't have Q rules as part of the XTP. And so we're going to be making this better this year. In addition to providing a new functionality in FormsViewer to automatically, make data connections dynamic. We're going to have wizards for that. we're going to have wizards for some of these XTPs, specifically the ones that include QRules support. So this FV controls, I'm pretty hopeful that we'll be able to just add that as a button click in the FormsViewer Designer sometime this year. So just keep that in mind. And we're going to be looking at obviously the machine learning, the AI speech to text stuff, and this assistant integration, and that's a major focus this year. But we're also going to be doing a lot of wizardification, if that's a word, wizardifying our FormsViewer Designer, and of course adding the Canvas editing support so that you don't have to go back to the designer. So, okay, that's a quick wrap up. Any questions from yesterday? Did anyone have questions on any of the labs? Okay, so we're going to jump in and we're going to quickly do this one-click access demo using SMS. And before we get started, before we actually do the demo, I've got a couple slides here that will help set the stage for that demo that Kirby's going to do. So what we're trying to show here with this one-click is we're extending that SMS text technique to make it even better by providing a notification. And really, what you're going to see here is we're going to actually why don't I just do the demo? Kirby, I'm going to switch to you, and we'll just do the demo, and then we'll come back to the slides. I think that will make more sense.
Okay, Patrick.
You ready? You are now presenter.
Let me know if you can now see my screen.
Yep.
Okay, so here we're going to, for this lab, for the one-click access, we're going to use, again, the expense report form. And then, as you can see, I have here my name and the manager and accounting manager. So this expense report form will go through 2 levels of approvals. So the first is the manager and the second one is the accounting manager. So yeah, for the purpose of this demo, I made myself both the manager and the accounting manager. So let's try to add some details here. So let's put $1 and then submit. And
I think it has to be
here,
McDonald's for $1. Starbucks, there's nothing on the Starbucks menu for $1.
Yeah, I agree. It's just a sample. So as you can see here, I have this message and it has the link here. So when I click on that, it will direct me to the expense report form. So as a manager, I can just approve the form via mobile. So as you can see here, it asks me to add or enter the confirmation code. So it will send us again a text message containing the approval code, which is 2499. So let's try that. And if we click confirm, we can now approve the form here. So it says here that it's pending for manager's approval. And we're able to see all the details that I've entered earlier. And then here we have a text box here where we can enter manager comments. So let's say,
How did it go from $1 to $50?
oh yeah, I don't know how that happened.
Looks like it's a different one.
This is a previews. Yeah, I think this is the one that I entered earlier. But let's just proceed approving. So if we click approve, it will send another text message to the accounting manager. So here I have a new text message. The accounting manager, and then if I click on that, okay, something's not right. It's already paid. I think this is the one that I entered earlier. I'm not sure what's happening,
Why don't we go
but
back to
it
the other
should.
site? Let's try it from the other side. I know that you deployed it to this training site, Kirby, and that might be the problem, is there's probably something that's not fixed up. Can we just do it from the site we did it
Yeah.
last week? Because I think that that worked just fine last week, and let's just go back to that site and do it from there. And
Okay.
so obviously the demo has a little bit of a speed bump here, and just while people are, I'll talk a little bit for a second here while you're up creating this expense report on the old demo site from last week.
Okay.
A couple of things is we'll figure out why that's happening. Obviously, this is a demo; it's not a live production thing. But I think that what we're trying to do is show the technique and there is a major security flaw in the fact that it opened the previous one, and that needs to be fixed. But the idea here is that if the user gets a text message and if they open it in a certain amount of time, say 60 seconds or 90 seconds, we can be assured that they're the ones opening it. And the reason for that is that we're only sending it to one person. They have a phone that is verifying them when they try to access the phone. It would be very difficult for them to forward that text message to somebody else within that time frame, 60 seconds or 90 seconds. And in addition, so the reason why Kirby got a text message there was because it had been more than 90 seconds since she had accessed that previous form. So it did let her open the previous form. The link there's a bug in the link. But if she's within the 60 or 90 seconds, it will just let her in and let her approve it without any text message with the verification code. And that's because we texted her with the link. So she's opening the link quickly. We know she wasn't able to forward it. Even if she forwards the link to somebody else to approve it, she's complicit, right? So it's her responsibility anyway. So what really, the kind of the clever thing about this is that it streamlines the process, and this is great for things like approvals where you do just need a quick thing. Now, if it's more than 90 seconds, let's say it's that she waits longer than 90 seconds, then she will get a second text. So she gets the link texted first, and then the second text will be the code, because it has to verify that she is who she is for that link. And what's interesting here is the form itself is sending the text. So when she opens the form, it does a check to see, is this more than 60 seconds? And if it is, then the form accesses Twilio and sends text to her, verifying that she's the one that's got the form open. But if it's less than 60 or 90 seconds, then we don't need to do that because we just sent her the link, right? So when the form is submitted, we take a timestamp, and then we save that timestamp in the form, and we compare against that when she opens it from her cell phone. The other thing you might have seen here, Kirby, what are you doing?
I think I know the problem now.
Okay.
It's pointing to the wrong URL here.
Okay. That makes sense. So you can just fix it and do it from the new site. That's cool. Okay, so while you're fixing it, I'll do a little more chat. So
okay.
These long URLs should show up with an icon in your phone. They shouldn't show up with this long, crazy URL. And you may ask, well, what's going on, Qdabra? Why do we have these ridiculously long URLs? Good question. You can thank Microsoft for that. Microsoft uses URLs for their online SharePoint platform. And if you look at SharePoint itself, like if you're using Flow or Power Apps or any of the 365-based provider-hosted services, they're all URL-based. And this is how Microsoft gets around the, this is how Microsoft kind of communicates between services running outside of the front-end server, which is the, in the old days you had these front-end servers for SharePoint, and the tenants where 365 is running still has front-end boxes. Well, you're not running provider-hosted services on those front-end boxes. They're just handling network traffic. So when SharePoint goes off to say, give me something from a third party or its own provider-hosted service, it has to use these URLs with these parameters encoded in it. And it's kind of frustrating as a developer because these URLs can be limited in length. It used to be we had a 512 character limit. I think nowadays it's 1024. But there's still a limit, a finite limit to it. Now, we don't run out of room with these URLs, but we do think it's kind of lame that Microsoft is overloading essentially the URL to pass a lot of parameters. But it's good in some ways because it allows you to quickly debug what's going on and look at the URL and see, we got the URL wrong. So, Kirby, are you ready? I'm trying to fill the gap.
Yeah, let me just try it again. Sorry about that, everyone. Let's go back to our Manage Template site and for day 3, here's our form. And I'm just gonna enter again another form.
When you're using SharePoint IDs as part of your parameters and your URL is wrong and it points to a previous library, you're going to get a different expense report, right, if one matches that ID. And that's probably what happened in this case, is that when Kirby entered in the coffee and she saved it, it sent a URL to her, but the URL was pointing to the old library, but their ID actually matched an item in that old library. That's a lot of burgers. $23 of burgers. Okay. When you're stressed out, you need burgers. That's for sure. So.
Yeah. So I should now. Okay. So here's the new link. Now.
When we saw this last week, it was actually scrunching up the link, and it was showing an icon. I wonder why that's not happening.
Okay, sorry about this. We have another error here.
Yeah, well, that's what we get for trying to fix it on the fly.
Yeah.
Can we just go back to the old site and just demo it from there?
I can't find where I uploaded the one from the webinar.
It's just in demos. You want me to do it?
Demos?
I don't have the cell phone. Yeah, it's just in demos, I believe. Let's just check it out. Go to FormsViewer and just see what the version is. Thanks everyone for your patience. While it wouldn't be live if you didn't have hiccups every now and then, and that's proving to you that we actually aren't doing smoke and mirrors. We actually have a bug in our demo. So we're going to fix it by just switching back. Yeah, click on FormsViewer. I'm pretty sure it's on this site. It might be on demo singular, but let's just see this for a second. And yeah, it might be here. Click on, go to FormsViewer here. So you didn't see it on the other one, right?
No. I don't think it's here.
So go back. I didn't see where you were on demos. Were you? View on demos? You didn't see it, okay. Sorry,
Yeah.
it's not refreshing quickly. It's got to be in one of those sites.
I think
There
this
it is.
is the one.
Yep, 117. That's it. Yay! And there actually should be an expense report library here, Kirby, that you can go to. So just do it from the library.
Here.
Yeah, it should be. Okay, let's try it. Yeah, let's try it from here. I'm sure this will work because we didn't change this. So yeah, go ahead and try it from the top there. Click new. Yep, that'll work. So just go to the expense report library, not from the list. Just go back to the library, and maybe your screen's not refreshing, but
Yeah,
maybe.
I'm now here in the library.
Okay, we'll pause for a second, and it'll refresh.
Okay.
Great. Now just go to FormsViewer here. Click on FormsViewer here, and we'll launch it. Okay, demo take 2. Thanks for your patience. Thanks, Kirby, for jumping through all these hoops here.
Okay, so here's another version of the expense report. So let's try another submission. Equipment. Let's buy another iPhone. And submit. Okay, so the PDF is rendered, so the text should, we should receive the text any minute now. Okay, so here's the link to the form, and if we click on that,
And we shouldn't get the SMS text because you're within the 60 seconds. So you should be able to just go in there and approve it.
Yep, but if we try to wait for a few seconds and click again the link, let's try that again.
How many? I thought it was like 90 seconds. Are you sure we waited long enough?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Well, we can wait a little longer. So let's wait for 40 more seconds here. And but yeah, that looks better. So I think that's the right one then. That time. So it's working now.
Yeah.
And we should, yeah, after a certain amount of time out, she's going to get another challenge, from the form. I think it was 90 seconds. So you're just so fast, even from the Philippines, with your blazing internet connectivity. it's still tough to hit the timeout. It's amazing how connected we are. There we go.
The section already appeared, so we are now getting the approval code here. So it says 0480. Okay, I think this is it. And confirm. And now we can now approve the form. So let's approve that, and another text will come in, and
And that's because you're not only serving as your own manager, but you're also the accounts payable person, right?
yes.
Accountant. I think people can see how this kind of a solution would be very easy to extend using the assistant APIs that, for the dialogue with the phone, so you don't have to actually type, especially when there's a few number of fields. And there's only, if it's a long form, it's going to be difficult to use an assistant to fill it out. But for these smaller, shorter approvals, okay, we're just waiting for it to acknowledge you as the accountant. But it's taking a long time.
Yeah, it's taking too long. Yeah, I think the form is still loading.
Okay.
That's why. Okay. So submission is done, and
What we should say instead on submit is, instead of saying your form is successfully submitted, we should say, success, take a deep breath. But I don't see it. It should be texting you like right on the submit if you're
yes.
if you're in the
I'm
if
not
you're
sure
the
what's
accountant.
happening.
Maybe we took you out of the accountant role.
Well, my phone is there, so in the
Okay.
users list. So okay, so I have it now. Not sure why it took so long. So let's open that, and I'm now approving as the accounting manager.
And once again, because you're doing it so quickly, you're not going to see a challenge with the text code, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. You got your notification too. The flow is almost faster than the text.
Well,
Oh, you
I
got
don't know, but
maybe that was because of the time of how long it took. Okay, well at least you got the code.
yeah.
Try entering something
And then-
different, Kirby. Oh, you're too fast. Okay.
Sorry.
That is the right form, it looks like. Okay. And what we're doing is we're capturing the time at the bottom here, like you saw yesterday with change history. We're capturing the history of the manager and the approver, so we know this is the right form. So the demo did work, in spite of Kirby being located on a very remote island in the Philippine archipelago. How remote is it down there? You're not even in Manila, right? You're like off in some foreign location, right?
We're 3 to 4 hours away from Manila.
So you have you're just sitting there on the beach, right? Just kidding. Okay.
So yeah, going back to the form, so our expense report is now paid, and as you can see, all the approvals history is here, so you can see who approved and when the form was approved. So I think that's it for the demo.
Thanks, Kirby, for getting through that, and thank you everyone for your patience, and sorry about the silly later by me. I hope that wasn't too disorienting, but I was just trying to add some dialogue while we were trying to work through that. But we did get through it. We went back to the webinar form we did last week. The new form, we got a bug in the deployment. We need to fix that. Just wanted to get back to these slides and really talk again about what we saw. So rather than send email, rather than build a flow or a SharePoint designer-based workflow, we're sending a text message, and then can you see my screen okay, Kirby?
Patrick?
Yeah, is my video coming through?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So did that lose any audio?
For you.
Okay, thanks. So what we just saw was that we're simplifying this process of getting approvals and using SMS text notifications. And the reason we're doing this is to streamline the access. And how are we doing it? We're sending a text to the user who is next up in the chain of approvals, like in this case, the manager. And we're using the same technique we used yesterday for that. We're using the Twilio API to send that. When the form is submitted, the submitted form sends a text to the person who's next in line. And that's a link. That text includes a link to open the form externally, anonymously, which is a feature in FormsViewer we discussed yesterday. And it's accessing a user's list, just like the form we did yesterday is. And it's actually decrypting their phone numbers and doing all of that, just like we saw yesterday. So there's two different modalities to this form. As you saw when Kirby was filling it out, on the left we have a view that looks good in the desktop, gives you more real estate to edit. But then when she opened it up on her mobile phone, her Android, she saw a more condensed view. And so here what we're doing is we're not only using a style sheet, but we're also detecting when they open it from a mobile phone. And the way we do that is using the there's a what you call a user agent string that's passed as part of the browser. The browser tells the FormsViewer what it is, and we're checking on that to switch to that friendlier view. So the benefit of using mobile is it allows someone to readily respond to it on the go, and it also the view being condensed allows them to not have to use their fingers to expand and collapse it to see it. Now I think in the form that you just saw it was 90 seconds, but the trick here is to just give them a timeout. So if you give it a timeout, then you don't have to do an SMS text if they're within that window. And this is something that I haven't talked to the people who determine whether something is secure or not. The federal government, the FDA, or whatever it is. I mean, there's all kinds of different standards. There's Part 11 compliance that requires digital signatures. And every organization has its own regulations, but I think it's pretty obvious that if we send a text message to somebody and we give them 30 or 60 seconds to open it, that it's near impossible that there would be any kind of hacking in that situation. They could forward the message to somebody else, but like I mentioned earlier, they would be complicit in that. They would have to do it themselves. So because we're sending it to someone's cell phone, unless they were able to somehow intercept this SMS text message, and I'm sure the NSA can do that, but we don't have any control over that, and everyone's going to have the same issue on that. So for the purpose of business processes, I think this is fine. I think you don't need to do another challenge if they open it quickly. You can just let them approve the form, and so that gives them that total hassle-free, no extra code to enter. They just click the link, they hit approve, maybe they add a comment, and it's just so fast. Now, if they wait longer, then you're not sure. Well, maybe they actually were busy, they were in a meeting, so we better verify who they are. Okay, so if it goes beyond that 60-second or 90-second window, we're going to prompt them. And like you saw in Kirby's case, where the second notification came later because of the connectivity issues. The first time she approved that $32 iPhone, it was pretty fast and she didn't get prompted. But the second time, because of the delay, it actually did hit the 90-second window and she had to enter that code. And that's, once again, just 4 digits. So it's a lot easier than entering your email and your phone number or your login and your password. So it's still hassle-free for the most part, even if they wait beyond the timeout. Okay, and then if they open up again, we of course have to have logic in the form that detects that the form has already been approved or rejected and complains. Now, we didn't add this to the demo that she did the first time, but if we were to open that form again that we just saw, you would see a message saying you already approved this form. And the reason why we have to do that is because we don't want somebody going back to their old SMS messages and clicking a link from 2 years ago and reapproving something or re-rejecting something. So we have to have some way to check to make sure if it is approved or rejected, we're not going to let them do that again. That's pretty easy to do. Okay, that's just a hide show rule. So any questions on that demo? I think we're going to take a quick break here. This might be a good time to do that. Yeah, questions? Deanna, David.
Just a quick question. So if somebody does forward the link to somebody else, I mean, chances are the second person is not going to get to that link within the 90 seconds that it was sent to the original person, correct?
Correct. And so then the code would be sent to the original person anyway, so they wouldn't be able to do it.
That's what I thought. All right.
Yeah. So I don't know why we didn't think about this last year, but this is actually a pretty clever way to streamline your business processes. And we're going to be adding it to all of our forms because it's just such a time saver, especially for those second and third order actions that need to be taken. I think that for the first, when they open a form for the first time, they need to enter some information. I don't think that's a really good use case for mobile, unless it's a really short form, right? Or unless we have the assistant speech-to-text built in, which we hopefully will have at some point later this year. Thanks, Athena. That's a great question. Yeah.
Is it possible for some scenarios where we have two people that have to approve at the same level? Does it work?
Yeah.
For
Yeah. So that's a great question. I'm really glad you asked that because there are essentially two kinds of workflows that we see. We see sequential workflows where one person approves it once and then the next person, and that's kind of what Kirby showed. She had the manager approving it first, and then accounting was going to pay it and approve it. And accounting might say, forget it, you're not going to get the money, and send it back to the manager. But there's also a situation where you have two people or more that need to chime in at the same time. So I want to just quickly talk about that, and then we'll take a break. And then, if there's other questions, we can answer them. But we've done a bunch of webinars on this in the past. I just want to direct your attention to hopefully I can get to my screen here. GoToMeeting and PowerPoint are fighting one another. And I'm going to try to corral it into... I had the same issue yesterday. I'm not sure why I'm having this, but just give me 1 second here. On our webinar page, we have a link to a webinar we did for parallel approvals. So if you go to Qdabra.com, education, so the trick is when you have a parallel approval, so what you're going to do, and this is actually a really cool pattern as well that we've added to trainings in the past, but what you're going to do is when you submit that form that needs to be approved by 2 or more people, what you're going to do is you're going to actually create child forms for it. So you're going to send out multiple notifications, and each notification is actually going to be a link to a different form that was, essentially it's going to be a form that doesn't exist yet, but it's going to be a different template. And if you look back, and I think this is, gosh, what was it, 2017 maybe? It was May. Maybe it was beginning of April. So maybe it was this last year. Well, one of these, I need to send a link out maybe later, but there was a webinar we did, and I want to say it was well, we'll get the link during the break. But we did a webinar, oh, here it is. So it is 2017. Get same time feedback for your form. So this is kind of a bad title, but basically what we're showing in this webinar on the May 11th of 2017 is we're showing how two people can access the form at the same time. And the way we do that, and the trick here, is that when that first form submits, what it does is it sends out multiple text messages to all of the approvers, okay? And the key thing is that link that you're sending in the text message is going to point to a child form. So it's a template, and that template is only used to capture their approvals, right? And so when that child form opens, it's opening in, it's creating a new instance just for that approver. And therefore, people can do it at the same time. It doesn't matter because they're all opening a separate instance of the child form. And then they say approve or reject, and then guess what? The parent form, if they open it again, it's going to query that child form library, and it's going to see all the approvals and rejections, and then it's going to display them, right? And so with this two-part solution, you can actually do parallel workflows, and the SMS text will work as well. And in fact, what we should do, Kirby, is you and I, in the 2 or 3 weeks, we should actually do this webinar again with the one-click SMS, because I think that it would be, I mean, I think that those two should be combined, really. I don't know if that answers your question, Athena, but yeah, totally possible. You will need a separate child XSN form that handles the approvals. Take a look at the May 11th webinar from 2017, and it shows exactly that pattern. It doesn't have the SMS text in it, but you can see how it's done.
Awesome, thank you.
David, did you have a question?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, great. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and it's currently 7:52 a.m. Pacific, 10:52 Eastern. So we're going to come back here in about 10 minutes, and we're going to do, we're going to show how to add the Twilio XTP, the reusable template part for SMS, so you can add it to any form. We're going to show that next. I'm just going to get my break slide up, but talk to you in 10 minutes. Okay, we're back, and hopefully you can hear me okay. Kirby, can you hear me? Joanne, you there?
So we can hear you, Patrick.
Wonderful.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. We're going to show next, first of all, we've got two labs, one to show you how to add the one-click to your form, and we also have, I think, a lab, and Joanne, correct me if I'm wrong, but is the reusable template part separate, right? So there's kind of like, which one should they do first?
I think we should do first the Twilio template part.
Okay, great. Are you ready to show them that?
Kirby
Yes,
is-
Patrick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna present that too.
Okay, Kirby, I'm making you presenter.
Okay. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, so for this lab, we're going to use the FormsViewer survey form that we used yesterday. So here's the template part that we added in the form. So it won't allow us to fill out the survey without entering our phone number here to authenticate. So I'm just gonna enter my number and click send code. Okay, so here's the code 6163 and then verify. So here we can now fill out the survey. Okay, so that's the Twilio XTP we just saw. And I'm going to show you how to apply that to your own form. So here we have the lab guide. So before you start, we're going to use the starter form that we just provided. So here we have the starter form. And then we also have here the Twilio XDP that we need to import to our form. So here's the survey form. And then as you can see, we have here the full name and email and all the questions in here. So first of all, we're gonna inject the Twilio XDP here. So to do that, let's do the same steps that we did yesterday. So here, let's browse and go to our folder. So here's the Twilio XDP. Okay, so once that's in InfoPath now, so let's go ahead and click the XDP. So now it's now in the form. And as you can see, this is the part where we enter our mobile phone number and also the verification code. So in this lab, you need to, it will show you how to create your own Twilio account. So it's the Twilio account is very, you have to sign up first, and then after you sign up, Twilio will give you an account SID and auth token. So you have to take note of that too, because we have to enter that in FormsViewer. And then Twilio will also give you a generated phone number that Twilio will use to send text messages. And then once you have that, once you have those information, we can now go ahead and enter the credentials or the account ID in FormsViewer. So to do that, we'll go to the FormsViewer page, and here we have the Manage Credentials link. So you're going to do this if you need to connect to any third-party web services in order for them to work in your forms. So here we'll just click the Add Credentials, and here we'll fill out these fields, and here's the instructions on how to do that. And as you can see, we already have that the Twilio credentials here. And once that's done, we'll go ahead and edit our XTP. And same with yesterday, we have to change also the temp command and temp results fields. So let's go ahead and do that. So in the send code button, here are the fields to change. This one too, for the prompt. And then for the verify button, we have one. Okay, so I think we also have to change the fields under authentication Twilio. So here we have the escape or the encode command. And here we'll change this endpoint to the result node, and same with the to field.
So it has to escape it because it has some strange characters in it or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's two new commands that we have in FormsViewer that we haven't talked about before, and encode and decode allow you to escape URLs if they have special characters, which is what we're doing there.
Then the last one. Okay, so I think that's it for changing the command and result nodes. So let's save that. And then we'll also configure the rules for Twilio. So in here, in finished loading node, in Qdabra rules, we have to add a new rule called set Twilio values. So in here, we're going to set the values for the account ID and the phone number we're going to use. So let's do that. Twilio account. This is the account that we're using in Qdabra. And phone number. Okay. So once that's done, we're also going to select the survey section or the section that you have in your form that you want to hide while the user is authenticating. So let's do that by adding a formatting rule. So here, this is the survey section, and let's add a condition where state is not blank. Okay, so next is we have to add another rule in finish loading node, and let's call it show survey section. And this is important when the user is opening a submitted form so that it shows the survey section and hides the Twilio sections. So if the form name is blank, which is under the main data source, is blank, we'll make this state blank as well. Okay, so that's it for the XTP, and when we upload this, let's try to upload that and make sure that works. Okay. Okay, let's try to upload with a different name. Okay, so once we open the form and try it again. Okay, something's not right. I think we missed something. Oh, sorry. This should be is not blank. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so as you can see, it prompts us the section, and this will send now the code. New code is 1160. So that's it for the Twilio XDP. So that's how
10 minutes.
easy.
Even with the 10 minutes, even with the speed bump, it's an awesome job.
Yeah.
Way to go. Especially under pressure there with the speed bump. You did a great job of maneuvering the XTP over that. Great job.
Yeah.
Let's just quickly, I'm going to quickly take over at present for a second, just kind of review what we saw, and then we'll ask and open the floor for questions here. Arthur, thanks for joining. It's great to have you here. I think we missed you during the really cool initial demo, but we're taping this, so you'll get the video later today. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again here. And go back to our slides. So yeah, it was less than 15 minutes, so great job to Kirby on that one. She's a pro. So really what we're doing here, and this is just a sample XML template part, a reusable section that you can add to your forms to enable the texting to verification. Now, obviously, you may want to change it so that it automatically does it when the form's opened, as opposed to giving them the ability to look themselves up and text themselves. But this is kind of also showing the technique that if you want to authenticate them, you could do this externally without just on a new form, right? You could actually authenticate them on a new form by looking up their information and looking at their phone number. Now, you still have to have those other two pieces, the user add, user info. So those are two critical pieces, right, for this solution. You'll need to have your users list in SharePoint. You'll need to be able to manage that users list somehow and authorize them to access the process and then activate them by allowing them to enter their phone number. So that the labs we saw yesterday are still critical for this entire process. And what Kirby's showing you right now is just that, adding that SMS text piece to a new form that uses the users list to look up their phone number and then to text them to validate who they are. So it works the way it is, obviously, but you can also think of doing it when they open the form from a link, right, where it's not a new form, and then it looks up their information and then it texts them. So you could have the form automatically text them without going through the steps of asking them for their name and their email. The only reason why we're doing it in name and email is to look them up from the users list. But if you already know who they are because you sent them a link with an ID in it, the form opens, it uses the ID to query the users list, gets their information, texts the person the phone number from that list, and if they're the right person, they get the text and they enter it in and they're good to go with that link. So that's kind of just a quick summary of how you would do that with a form opening from a link. So you're going to get the user's phone number, obviously. The form generates a verification code and then it sets a timer. So in this case, because we want them to enter the code within 120 seconds, a little bit kind of like what we saw a moment ago with the link, when we submit the form, the expense report form, it's setting the timer when it submits. In this case, when the form opens, we're setting a timer because the form is actually texting using Twilio. It's texting the user, right? So we want to give them 2 minutes to enter the code. So when the form opens and when they, it either sets the timer on open and texts them, or it sets the timer when they finished filling out their name and their email. And right before it's going to send to the Twilio text, it sets that timer, and then we compare against that timer to validate the code. If they're beyond 120 seconds, they have to enter another code. And what we didn't show is that if they enter the wrong code, it won't work. So it won't allow them to go forward. And there's a timeout too. If they do 4 incorrect entries, we're actually counting the number of times that they incorrectly enter the code, and we force them to get a new code after that. So as Kirby showed, their Twilio is probably the sort of SMS as a service provider out there today. They've been around since 2010 or so. They're just a really awesome service. We've never had any issues with them, and it's a great example of this new technology on the internet that's just reshaping our lives. It's allowing you to create applications that use text. So a couple notes here. It's 1 cent per send if you're doing a lot. It's 3 cents if you're doing a small amount. We end up spending, after the initial 1,000 runs out, then you're going to end up spending 3 cents per send until you hit a certain level, and then it's going to go down to 2 and then go down to 1. But it's, in general, we're not talking about a lot of money here. It's very inexpensive. But keep that in mind. You don't want to blast out a text message to 20,000 people, right, if you don't need to. So the key thing that Kirby showed was the ability to set, you're storing your account credentials in the Manage Credentials page. And this is a feature in FormsViewer that we provide to allow you to access third parties. Now, you could do it in the form, but FormsViewer has to access Twilio as well. And so FormsViewer has to log you in Twilio. It's much easier to do it using Manage Credentials page. But if you're like against storing those third-party credentials, now we encrypt those credentials and put them on the FormsViewer server. So the only thing on the server, once again, is the template XSN for your form. And you don't have to use Managed Credentials, but if you do use it, we encrypt those passwords and we put them there. So that's a potential security issue. For some people, they like, well, we're not going to do that. We're not going to, even though we trust Qdabra, we're not going to do that. So you could still put them in the template, but then once again, the template's going to be stored up there anyway. So when you are accessing these third parties, you do need to somehow obfuscate or encrypt the credentials that you're using, and that's the solution that we currently have for that. And we have a lot of customers using it. It's not we're doing security reviews and other things as well, but we've only had one customer out of over 100 that has decided not to do Managed Credentials. In general, you only want to use it if you're accessing a third-party website because it will streamline the access to that. You're not going to have to change that account ID and those API keys very often. We've never had to change ours. So if you're going to use this solution, you could certainly, if you're on-prem, you're going to have that FormsViewer server piece running on your hardware, so you're going to be able to manage credentials. It's all going to be on your stuff. You can also use FormsViewer on-prem installation in Azure if you're like, well, we don't want to use Qdabra's public instance, even though Qdabra has a geo-redundant, replicated across multiple data centers in the US and Europe. We have one data center in Southeast Asia right now. But even though we're doing our jobs to make sure we're fault tolerant, and if San Antonio gets hit by a lightning strike and the data center goes out, affecting 25% of Azure customers in the US, we're going to be fine because we're doing the right kind of replication and redundancy. You could set up your own. You could set up your own FormsViewer server in Azure running in a data center, and it would take about 4 hours to do that. So if you're like, well, we don't feel comfortable using the public instance because the other benefit of the public instance is we upgrade it every quarter with new versions of FormsViewer. So there's a little bit of support cost to installing your own, and then of course you have to figure out the whole geo-redundancy, replication kind of deal across data centers, which is hard. It took us a long time to figure that out, but we did a couple years ago. So keep that in mind. You do have an option if you're in the cloud and you don't want to use the public FormsViewer qfs.formsquo.com service. You can set up your own. There's no license fee to install it, to set it up. Right now, we are probably going to be charging for a FormsViewer on-prem license at some point in the future. But if you get it now, if you get the on-prem bits installed, we'll honor that forever. The thing I want to point out, though, is that you are going to need some support time from us to help you get that server set up. And roughly, it's in the 4 to 8 hour range. It can be less if it's quick. Azure tends to be pretty simple. If you've got a SharePoint farm you want us to help install on, it could be even more than 8 hours. But in general, it's about that range right now. So the benefit of using public instances, the upgrades, the fact that we're doing a lot more to serve you with that instance, and obviously support and all that stuff. But you do have the option if you're really worried about those credentials being stored on our servers. Now we're encrypting them as well, so okay, I said enough about that. The form is sending to Twilio using a make request. This is another JSON feature, just like we saw yesterday. And we do have a JSON to XML conversion tool in the FormsViewer Designer today that you can use for web services that you want to connect to that are not featured in our webinars or our training. So if you have your own JSON-based web service that you want to connect to, InfoPath out of the box won't do it, but FormsViewer will. We show you how to do it. We've got labs, webinars on that. And this is another example of how to do it with Twilio, because Twilio is a JSON-based XML service. So the XML builder is something you can find on this URL. So this URL actually will give you the Twilio JSON, and then in the FormsViewer design, you go in and you can build out the XML, and it'll inject the XML resource, and you're good to go. So let's do a quick feedback on this second demo. Does anybody have any questions? Does this make sense? I'm just going to pick on you, Arthur, since you're here now. Did you see the demo?
Yes, hello.
Hey.
I think I have missed the most of presentation. Yes.
Okay, we'll send you the video link. Don't worry.
Yes,
couple
I will
hours.
watch tomorrow.
Great. Kiara, any questions on what you saw here? Sorry to pick on you.
No, that's okay. I don't have any questions though.
Great. Just making sure that we still have contact to the outside world here.
Well, we're still
okay.
here.
Great. Okay, so last but not least, dashboards, right? We got to talk about dashboards. Not day 4 yet. We're going to talk about dashboards. So I should have created a separate slide. My slides are a little bit out of order here. But so just to, I guess, just a quick word or two about dashboards, and then Joanne's going to present the dashboards. So we've got a lot of dashboards at Qdabra. We use them to manage forms. So in general, like I said a moment ago, or maybe it was 20 minutes ago, if you have data that you're storing in SharePoint, and it's less than 5,000 items, don't worry. You can use the SharePoint out-of-box views to manage your data. The modern view is slightly better than the classic views, but there's still some bugs in it. Now, in addition, I want you to think for a moment about creating your own dashboard, so not using it. So why would you want to create your own dashboard? Well, you might want to prevent the huge explosion of custom views, right? Because that's a management nightmare, or because people, even though the view customization logic in SharePoint is fairly simple, maybe that's just too much to ask people to do. So what we're going to be presenting next is how to create dashboards in your form designer and use FormsViewer to host them. So in general, the dashboard's got a header, a footer, filters, results, paging, whatnot. Let's take a look at one of our dashboards real quick. And I finally figured out why my GoToMeeting was fighting with PowerPoint. It's because of the share mode I was in. Okay, so we're going to go to one of our websites here on 365 that has a dashboard. And I'm just going to pick our support dashboard because that's something that I should be looking at every day, and I haven't looked at today yet. So we have our dashboards featured front and center on our home page, which pretty simple home page right now, but that's a good place to put the dashboard links. And the dashboard's just opening up. It's doing a bunch of queries on load. So it's taking, a lot of these forms will open very quickly. In this case, some forms, you want your forms to open in less than 5 seconds, and this form is probably a little bit over that. Once it opens, though, it stays open. So typically for dashboard forms, you are going to want to have them query data on open. And this is querying a database in SQL, and it's pulling all of our existing. We only have 8 support tickets that are active right now, which is pretty low. I don't see any of you in this list. That's good. But you can see this is an example of a dashboard. So this has a header. On the top here, you can see I've got a new support ticket. I can add a customer. I've got some filtering here. I can search by a term. If I want to search for, let's just search for, what's a good example here? Let's say I'm looking for somebody that has a problem with SharePoint. Then I can search for the term, and hopefully it will return everything, even some closed tickets maybe. Until I've never tried this before, but okay. So there's the obviously that was not very useful because it returned exactly the same list that I have. Maybe SharePoint's in everything. Let me try one more search. But you get these filters on top, and it should allow you to quickly find what you're looking for and then approve it. And then you get links. So for each of these tickets, where am I? Sorry, I've got a machine issue here. I think Chrome is going crazy. So it did actually return a gazillion items for SharePoint. As you can see here, it just took a long time. There were 582, and now Chrome is having a hard time breathing because there's so much data in it, and my computer is also spinning with the fan. So you can see there that one of the things that's interesting about FormsViewer is that we don't really have a limit to how long the views can be. So if you've got a lot of data, well, if you want to wait a couple seconds, it will display it. And you can see here that every single ticket that had SharePoint in it got returned. And I was not able to click on search for configuration because it was still displaying the results for this. But you can see there's the one that I was looking for right there. So I can expand this ticket and show some details about it. In general, dashboards should have expand collapse sections. Now this is a very large view at this point, so we've got about 30 pages of data. So we have to wait a little bit while that expand collapse works. I should have picked something that was not so prevalent in our database. And this is just a general issue. You want to do paging. Now, this form does not have paging on it, but the form you see in the training will have paging. So we should have added paging to the support form, but because we're never searching for large numbers, but we're always looking at active cases, it wasn't a huge priority for us. So we haven't done that yet. So you can see here that I got a little more information. I can look at the current status. I can click on the doc ID to open the child form in another window. Now, this is kind of just a general look at a dashboard that we use every day to manage our support tickets. Any questions on that? And we have a lot of dashboards. So we use dashboards for managing our timesheets. We use dashboards for managing our customers, our invoices, you name it. And dashboards are all have the same kind of things. They have headers, footers, filters, some status information at the top, who the user might be. They'll have the body. The body will have rows and columns and potentially some three-dimensional information with expand collapse, right? So you can go deeper on the x-axis. You can think of the y-axis here being the items. All the rows each row is an actual support ticket, and then the x-axis are the columns, this metadata that you want to display, just like those columns in SharePoint. So the benefit of using FormsViewer to do this is that you can kind of control what you show your users, and instead of giving them a knife they can cut themselves with by SharePoint views can be customized, right? So they can go in there and they can screw things up. You give them one size fits all dashboard that they can see, and then you give them some options. They can filter it and find the data they need. And so there's definite benefits to that. Okay, so I'm going to close this humongous dashboard view, and we're going to now switch to Joanne's demo. Any questions for me? Okay, Joanne, you're on. You have audio, Joanne?
Oh, yeah. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, and we can see your screen. Thanks. Can you start over?
Okay. Yeah, so I'm now showing you the expense report dashboard that we created. And this is for the purpose of just showing the basic information from the expense reports list that we created from day one. And as you can see, it's already displaying those information. I have submitted some sample expense reports with your name on them right here. And this dashboard is really helpful. For example, if a manager comes in and they can see which form is submitted, which form is pending for approval. So it's really helpful for them to take action right away. So this form solution contains, I would say, 6 to 7 features maybe that are really, really important for this dashboard. And the first feature is this filter that you're seeing on top here. This is the fields that allows us to filter by, for example, employee name. So as you can see, your names are used as default values here. So for example, if I choose one, Kiara, and I search for her expense report, okay, so her expense report is shown here. And if I switch to another, so apparently I've only entered one expense report for each of you. So let me try myself. Just one also. Okay, so for example, I want to look for those expense reports that are submitted. So it's going to query that for me. See? So what this is doing is that it's comparing from the values that we selected here to the values or the columns in the SharePoint site, right? So this is the expense reports, and it's just comparing those values that we selected from this columns here and returning the result in our dashboard. So that's why you're seeing it's filtered now. So that's the first feature, the filtering section here. And then the next one is the status indicators. You'll already seeing that now that the rows are being highlighted with different colors. And it's really helpful if you're showing different colors status indicators for different status of the form. So for example, if approved, I'm showing this darker green, or if it's already paid, then a lighter one. And if it's rejected, I change it to pink or red shade color. Okay, so I think the next one would be the sorting. So this is the sort. Oh, this is the sort button, the up and down arrow here. So if I click on that, it will sort this report date column to ascending order. And if I click on it again, it will just toggle to descending. Then the next one is date range. So this also has that feature to select a date range from. So that's the toggle for the date range section. So if I select, for example, expense report for this month only, is it filtered? Right, okay. So if I select an earlier date, for example, 2018 to December. Did it show it right? Okay, maybe I have a bug there, but So you can see I only have several or few rows to show here. So it's just showing from March up to October, yes. Okay. So after that date range filter, the next feature would be this pagination that Patrick mentioned earlier. So if you have, for example, 100 rows or more than, you can use this pagination XTP that I'll show you later. But if you have more than 500 rows, then maybe you need some other form of pagination for that. Or maybe you can, I don't know, maybe you can submit to SQL because more than 500 rows or 1,000 rows will put a lot of weight on your form, right? So this is just for a few hundred rows. Okay, so that's pagination. And what else did I miss? The features for this is this debug section down below. So it's showing the QRows debug section. This is a repeating table for the execution history. You can see which QRows command were run, and you can also see the result. So for example, we are fixing the URL to point to your own SharePoint site. So if you just grab the end form for this lab, you can deploy that to your form and it will automatically point the data connection to your site. You don't have to change the data connection. It will change those connections for you on the fly. So you can see that it's running successfully here. If you are having an issue with a command, it will show error, and the error or the description for that error will show here, so you can get some information and fix those errors. For example, you have a mistyped command in your parameters, so you can easily see that here. So that's the debug mode or debug section of QRows. Maybe you're wondering, how did I access that? I was just clicking on this hidden button down here. You can see it's displaying like as if it's a text or static text, but it's actually a button control. And I've just removed the shading and borders, so it's showing like a static text. So it's a secret behind that. Okay, so those are the features. I have an icon here that toggles for the help section. If you want to display some instructions for users on how to use your form solution, you can put some instructions here. So do you have any questions for this form? If not, I'm going to proceed on how to build this dashboard in InfoPath Designer. So when you get to the labs that we provided you, you can see that we have provided a starter form for this lab. So grab that and open that in design mode, and you'll be presented with this canvas with our logo, but you can replace that with your own logo, and also you can change this color scheme, or change whichever form solution you want to use. Replace that here, right? So to start, we need to build a dashboard display first. So, but first, before you do that, you need to make sure that you have a data connection to the expense reports list, or to whichever list you need to get information from. In this case, I'm going to use the expense reports list. So I'm just retrieving some columns here. So if I switch to my task pane here and show you, this is the columns that I'm retrieving for this form, right? So just really basic information for the expense report. So the first thing you need to do is just click on this repeating table and drag that in the view like that. And then for this, I will just like to format a little bit. Put some colors maybe. Or make it a little bigger. And then I remove this ID because we don't need to display that. And then the next thing you need to do is format the controls to a calculated value field. So we're doing that because we're placing these text boxes with a calculated value, because calculated value controls are lighter than text boxes. So we're only displaying static fields, so calculated values are the best ones to use for this dashboard if you're just displaying static. Well, if you're displaying links, that's a different case then. So I'm just going to continue changing this just like that. And after you're done with that, you're gonna end up with, yeah, something like that. So that's the first step, adding the data connection in, and then dragging this repeating table in your canvas. Then the next thing is to add the filters. The filters that you're seeing on top, we're adding that to the view as well. So I have here a group called filters in the main data source. And what you'll do is you'll grab that just right above the repeating section or repeating table and display that as a section. And here I'm going to insert table, sample, like that, and just put the text boxes here just to format it a little bit. And then type in the labels. Okay. And then you're going to click on each text boxes and change the control to a drop-down box. That way we can enter some default values. So, example, like that. Yeah, something like that. I'm not going to enter all of the names in, and just do the same for manager. Repeat that. And for status, you can use the same status, right? Like submitted, approved, and so on. And you can customize this, depends on the need for your solution, right? So after you're done with that, you're going to come up with something like this. And don't forget to add this search button here down below. The full instruction is actually in the PDF file. So this has this rule that sets the filter. So it's just basically setting the query fields from our expense report here. So make sure to select from this query field instead of the data field. So that's important because we're querying from the list, right? So select that, that's our resource name, and change or point that to the value of the name from our filter group. Okay, so you may have noticed that I selected resource name here, but somehow the field name is changed here. The reason behind that is because sometimes SharePoint is changing the column names for whatever reason, but because that's underlined, meaning you've already selected the correct column. So this is the column for that. So don't worry about that. Even that's you don't understand that field, right? Okay, so that's the resource name. And just repeat for the rest of the fields, for the manager field, status field, and the expense date field. Then after that, after you filled out the fields you're going to query, then put an action to query the expense report. Okay, so that's the filter. And after that, if you save this and upload that to FormsViewer, you're going to see something like this, right? Very basic. It's also working, I hope. Yes, yeah. But it doesn't have any status indicator colors, right? So that's what I'm going to show you next. So in order to add that color to your repeating table, that highlight color, that changes depending on the status of the form or the row, you need to highlight the repeating table and add a formatting rule. And then I'll call it shade, for example, submitted. And condition is if status is equals to submitted. And I want to change the color to something like yellow or lighter. You can customize it here. Okay, and then you can add another one, right? And then add a condition the same as this for approved, for rejected, so on and so forth. So once you've completed that, so that's very easy, right? This is my finished view for that. So right there. So that's why the colors are now changing here, because of that our rules formatting rule in the repeating table, right? So that's status indicators. Next is table sorting. How can we sort the rows? For example, if we want to sort the report date, how can we do that? So you'll just put the cursor here on our report date header, and then use a picture button. And then for the picture button picture, I will use the sort.png. It's also provided in the lab folder. So that's my picture button. And for sorting, we also have a different field that we're using in the main data source. It's under form logic, and this sort by and attribute order. So this has some rules already. So this is the rule that's just toggling between ascending and descending order. So this just simply means that if it's not ascending and sort by is not blank, then set the order attribute field to ascending, and vice versa, right? So another thing that you will need to complete the sorting is that you need to get the XPath for the columns. Let me just show you my finished view here. Sort. Okay, because we have a rule here Okay, so this is the sort table command from QRules. Okay, so this is a command in QRules that we use to sort the table rows. So it's using these parameters, which row you want to sort. In this case, we're using that repeating table from the expense reports list. And this compare parameter is just the field we're comparing it from. Like right now, we're using this sort by field. And the order is that order attribute field under that sort by. And the DS name or the data connection name is the expense report. And you can also use FormsViewer to build your sort table command like this. I'll show you in a minute. So in the command builder, just type in sort table. So this is the row parameter, right? And we're using dynamic because we're selecting from the secondary data source expense report. So this is the row we want to sort, right? So select that. And we're comparing the field from another dynamic field from our main data source. That is the sort by field. Next is the data connection name, expense report. Order is dynamic as well. Main data source, form logic, sort by, order. Okay, and then copy this command. And if you just place that in here, back in Mindful Path Designer, you see the formula doesn't contain any errors. But I just noticed that I just need to re-click this, right? So I'm not gonna okay that. So that's how you build a sort table command, right? And you have another rule here that is just setting the sort by. Yes, so that's how we set this sort by field here. That's in the button, the sort button. So this is the name of the column in SharePoint. That's why I mentioned earlier that you need to get the correct XPath. So for this example, we're getting the XPath for report date. So this is that field. I'm going to right click on that and copy XPath. I'll put that in a notepad, paste it in. So this is the field that I want. So that's what I'm comparing that. Right? So if you want to sort other columns, like for example, if you want to sort the resource name, you can just copy this, put that there, and then just replace this with the XPath of the resource name or the name for the column, right? Okay. So that's table sorting. This is pretty long. Any questions so far? I still have other 2 features to explain. Do you have any questions?
Great job so far, Joanne. Any other questions out there? Okay. It's going really well. Keep going.
Okay. So next is the date range filter. So how can you add that? Sort. Okay. So beside the sort button, you will add another picture button and use the picture button for the date range. And that's a little bigger. Let's resize that. Okay, so for the date range, we also have a separate folder in the main data source here called date range. And these are the fields under that we're going to use for our rules. So we're going to drag that group here between the filter section and the repeating table. So I'm going to drag that right there. And just like what I did before with the filter section, I'm going to add or insert a table. Like that. And place the date pickers here. Right. So just format it a little bit just to make it look better. Like that. Okay, then add in some colors if you want. Right. So after completing that, you're gonna have something like this. Date range filter. Okay, so this is the toggle for that. Another rule that you're going to add for the filtering, just toggling, I guess it's just toggling, right? And hiding that section, right? And you have here a formatting rule that hides if the report date is less than the start date and start date is not blank, so it will not show those rows. And if the report date is greater than the end date, in this case we're adding another day for end date plus 1, and end date is not blank, this field is not blank, then it will also hide those rows. So that's why we can only pick the date range we want from here. Okay, by clicking this button. So again, all the instructions are in the PDF file. You can follow it later if you want to do the same for your form. So that's table sorting. We're now in date range filter. Okay. So the last one for this feature is pagination. So pagination is making use of an XTP. So we also provide an XTP for this called paging. So by now you're already familiar with the reusable template part that we explained from day 1 to day 2, and just a while ago explained Twilio XTP too. So paging is an XTP that you can reuse as a control in your form. So that is this control here. So before I click on that, I want to make sure I'm in the right place. So I'm centering that here. And clicking on that will display this section, the paging XTP section. And it's also adding this paging logic to our data source. So the instructions are already in the XTP. You just need to follow these very straightforward steps, just making it a little bigger so you can see. So what it's saying is that it says here, click on the page number text box above, click on that, and then it will display this paging logic. So you'll know which data connection you need to edit. Then click on paginate node and modify these 2 rows that has this edit label on the name. And then this is setting the page length. So meaning it's displaying 20 rows per page. So if you want less than that, you can edit that. And the next is this rule that is setting the row count. So we have a placeholder value here. You need to cut that and place that in the formula window. And then replace this with a repeating field or repeating node from your data source expense reports. Right? Okay, after you're done with that, you need to place this repeating or this section, the paging XTP section. Cut that and place that out of that section, the template part section. Okay, and then just basically remove this. You don't need that extra sections there. Then remove this extra group that's added there. And then I think you're done. You just need to add a few more rules in your search button. It's not in here because it's a different XSN that I put it in. Let me just show you my finished. Yeah. So if I click on the search button and display the rules, you'll see that there's a trigger here that is setting the paginate field to go. So we're going to repeat that action under Qdabra rules, finish loading and set paginate to go on load. So another thing is that when you click on this repeating table, it has to have this formatting rule as well for hiding the previous row and hiding the next row. So it's making use of the count preceding sibling function, which determines the row number for each row. So if the user enters the page number here, the template part is already determining the page number or the page start and page end field. So it's already, the template part already knows that. So if the current row number, this one, is less than the page start, this one, or greater than page end, this formula will hide those rows. So that's the logic behind that. That's why you can paginate, right? Click on next page or previous page. Right.
Probably you need to, probably when they, the issue before with the pagination showing 2 pages, you probably need to set it to page one. As in addition to go, it probably needs to reset the page number when they filter it again. I'm just trying to figure out why you had that issue before on the pagination.
I'm not sure. I don't remember that issue. So you were saying when you enter one in the text box?
I remember the first demo, there was you filtered it down. There was still 2 pages though, remember? And it was kind of like everything was on the second page, and then you got it. There's like 4 items that you filter down to. Like if you go up to the top there and change the date range to just like October to December 2018, I think you had like 4 items. I think you might have been on the second page when you did this, but let's just see if it happens if you're on the first page. And yeah, so you've got that blank page there at the end. Yeah. So there's something else that has to be added there to kind of fix those pages up.
Okay, so let's see.
There you go. Yeah, it does a great job.
This PDF file. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, awesome job, Joanne. I know it's really late there, and I really love the fact that you have like different the steps corresponding to views. That was a really clever technique to make the demo go more smooth. But this is a challenging demo for everyone. I mean, it's going to be the webinar lab for the course. It's not a webinar, it's a lab. The lab file is probably the most complex lab we have so far, and it actually probably is the most complex one in the whole training. This one will probably take you 20 or 30 minutes to do. And so to condense the time, you know, Joanne, you know, obviously didn't go through every single step, but so it took her, I don't know, 20 minutes instead of 30, but it shouldn't be too bad. And I think that one question that came up for me was, and you may have the same question, was that, well, this is great for SharePoint, but my gosh, I want to be able to do 20,000 to 100 million items. How do I do that? So as you saw earlier with our support dashboard demo, it's actually pulling that from SQL. So we're using the same kinds of techniques. Now the benefit of using SQL is, number one, the query is going to be a lot faster. And not only can you filter it down with more complex filtering, but you can also, the data itself is going to come across faster. And the reason for that is the SharePoint has a lot of layers in it, and so the protocol stack is slower than if you were just querying SQL. So if you do have more than 5,000, 10,000 items and you want to move it into a SQL database, we have a tool for that. We mentioned that yesterday, and you can set up the dashboards to pull from the database directly. And you probably want to do that to reduce the time. So the other thing is, you might be wondering, well, why are we doing paging if we're only filtering and showing a subset of the data? Right. So, like, why would I need to do paging if I'm only going to be querying filtered data anyway, right? Well, I think that's for the case where I tried to query SharePoint with the support dashboard a moment ago, and I saw 582 entries come back. And it took a delay, and there was a delay when I tried to expand the row for the item I was looking for. And to prevent those delays, you want to prevent all the data showing on the screen. So you don't necessarily want to prevent people from pulling down large amounts of data. I do think that 2,000 or 3,000 rows is probably the limit in terms of data latency across the wire, across the network. But you can still pull down 3,000 items pretty quickly. And once you have them all in your form, now here's the challenge. You don't want to show everything, because if you do show everything, it's going to create a 50-page view in your browser, which is going to be slow, like you saw with my 582 items. So that's where paging comes in. We really should be adding paging to our support dashboard. We haven't done it yet because we are typically not querying that many items. But in your case, if you do have a lot of items, you can query SharePoint and you can pull down 5,000 items relatively quickly. There's some indexing you have to do if you want to go beyond that. You can go beyond that. The 5,000 is a soft limit. But for best performance, you're going to want to move large data sets into SQL and not use SharePoint as your data repository. And that's really what we're talking about here, is you can use the same exact techniques to query the forms in a database. And we have webinars and demos and labs on that. If you're interested in that scenario, let us know and we can give you a different lab that talks to a database. That's a little more complex though, because you have to set the database and you have to set up the queries to that database. So that's where we're choosing SharePoint in this case, because most times, most of the forms out there don't have large data repository needs. But there are 5 or 10% of the forms in the world that are collecting large amounts of data. And for those, we have a solution. So that's my only comment, and I want to open it up for questions and takeaways. I'm going to share up my screen, and we're going to finish up today's class. Any questions on that, Arthur?
No, I don't have any questions. It was clear for me. Just I wanted, I didn't receive any files for today's lab. Have you sent them?
Yeah, we sent them. And Joanna, can you check that real quick to make sure Arthur was on the email? It may have gone to your junk folder. Did anyone else not get the labs for today? Okay, David, did you get them?
Yeah, I had all of them for a while now.
Okay. Kiara, did you get an email this morning from us? with the day 3 content?
I did.
Okay, great. So
Yep.
Arthur, we'll check and make sure you're on there, and then we'll
Okay, thank
record
you.
it. Good. Sorry about that. Let's see, Kira, any takeaways for the day?
No, it was very interesting. You guys did a great job. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. David, how about you?
I think the dashboarding is going to be very useful for us, especially for our team in general, in specific. I think it'll be very helpful for managing and searching for any SharePoint sites that we have. I think that was the first thing that came to my mind. So I think the dashboarding is definitely going to be a very useful thing in the future for us.
Let me just show you our invoice dashboard. Here's another example of a dashboard. We got a lot of dashboards, but we've done some very complex dashboards for customers. In fact, I can show you one dashboard we did that does a calendar for a customer that has 5,000 scheduled items per month, and it's color coded. It looks like a calendar, and I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff you can do. The invoice request dashboard. Hopefully, I'm not showing any private data here, but once again, it's querying the stuff on load. We need to be a little more careful that we're not wasting a lot of time on load. This form also needs to be improved on load. We definitely, all of the dashboards should show up in 5 seconds or less. But so here's another dashboard. This is a simpler one. I can search for one of our companies here. You can see that we have a lot of companies we've been doing business for over the years. And I just picked MX Holdings because I just queried for them yesterday. And you'll see that the dashboard queries pulls in all this data, and then I can open up individual invoice requests using the link on the left. So let's just see if this will complete. I just did this yesterday, and I was surprised. We've been doing, what we've invoiced. MX Holdings has been a customer of ours for, I don't know, maybe 10 years. And you can see that this is another one where we need to look at display. And we only got 3 pages. It's not too bad, but you saw that there was a little bit of a delay there on the display. But as you can see, this isn't just another example. Obviously, we want to add paging to this one too. I always like to add a plus sign here, where you can add a plus to generate a new invoice or whatever it might be. So that's just another example of a dashboard. Thanks for giving us the feedback. And they're really powerful. I mean, you can take your DBXL backend if you need it, move it to Azure, and you can query that for the large data. And it's just a nice way. You're going to be using Power BI for reporting, or you'll use some other Excel for reporting or SQL reports. So dashboards don't think of them as being for reports, although we do have customers that use dashboards to print things, the print PDF command, and we saw on day 1, you can definitely add that with pagination, and the printing will print out a PDF. So that's a nice feature to give people a quick report they can take to a meeting to report items. But in general, for any kind of charting or graphing, you're going to want to use Excel, Power BI, or SQL reporting for that, not InfoPath and FormsViewer, because the charting just isn't there. Great to have your feedback. Deanna, any feedback for today?
Nothing. Well, I loved all the dashboards. I never thought of doing it in the form before, and I realized that we actually are doing it for like behind the scenes operations, but not for people to like query for things themselves. But it was really cool to see this method being used. And I really loved all the, looking at my notes here, everything else that we learned earlier today too. Everything was, again, very helpful, and I could see a lot of use for it in our processes. So exciting.
That's excellent. I'm really glad to hear that. Athena, any comments from you?
Just pretty much the same thing that Deanna said. We both were looking at the dashboard at the same time, thinking we do something very similar, but we never thought to implement it that way.
Yeah, I mean, people don't think, gee, it's for forms. No, it's actually just for web pages too. You can do it. And the cool thing about this is you can actually use it externally, right? So for people externally, they just need to get some information. FormsViewer has the external link, right? So you can have anonymous access to it, and you can show them the data. Of course, you can authenticate them if they're anonymous, right? You just give them an SMS code or something. Tomorrow, I want to thank everyone for their feedback, and I want especially thank Kirby and Joanne again for wonderful demos. You guys did an incredible job preparing today again for the third day in a row, and I think the class is going really well, mainly because of your hard work. We're going to do this again tomorrow. We're going to do pop-ups, overlays, and scaling of images. We're going to get you out of class tomorrow a little bit early. Hopefully this will take an hour and a half or so. We're going to show how to add pop-ups to your forms. So there's 3 ways to do it. You can use the show message, which you're familiar with from the InfoPath filler days. If you change the compatibility of your form in the designer to InfoPath filler, why would you do that? Well, because FormsViewer supports pop-up messages. We've seen some of them already. It's going to pop up in the browser giving the default pop-up, which doesn't look that good, so we don't recommend that. The second approach is using a prompt, Kirill's command. Third approach is using overlay. And then we'll also show you using an overlay how to scale an image automatically before you send something from a mobile device. So those are the demos up for tomorrow. Once again, if you do have time for the labs, please take a look and ping us tomorrow, and we'll have a quick summary at the beginning of the call to go over the labs from day 3. I hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, Patrick and everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks, Kirby. Thanks, Joanne.
Pleasure, thank you.